Yesterday, it was reported that Russia fired warning shots at a Royal Naval vessel and even dropped bombs in its path for crossing into what Russia says are its territorial waters off of Crimea. The UK and the West say that no, this is Ukrainian territorial waters, and Russia, you do not control it. Therefore, we are moving through a well-known international route. Well, according to one journalist on the HMS Defender, he said it was a deliberate move by the UK. Of course, the UK is also denying any warning shots were fired, but I don't really believe the UK on this one. Now, right now, tensions between the United States and Russia and China are getting worse. More specifically, Russia and China sort of working together against the US. We recently saw the war games 300 miles off the western coast of Hawaii, as well as China sending 28 warplanes into the Taiwanese air defense zone. So yes, it is an opportunity for both Russia and China to get what they want. And while they probably wouldn't normally want to work together, they seem to be. The big news right now is that, well, Russia is threatening to bomb any vessel that crosses into Crimean waters. This is a direct threat to the UK Royal Navy and in turn the Western allies and NATO. And some fear this is a dramatic escalation. Maybe it's just some words. But as I mentioned yesterday, when Russia actually fired the warning shots, now they're saying we will bomb you next time. It is always a grain of sand being added to the heap. It won't be one story that triggers the shot heard around the world, but this is the path we're on. And boy, is it worrying, because now Russia has said they reserve the right to use nuclear weapons in response to U.S. aggression. And China, as was reported yesterday, said that they will work with Russia to counterattack the U.S. in response to provocations. Think about what that means. What China has basically said is, it's not just that if the U.S. attacks us, we'll fight back. It's that if you provoke us, we will counterattack. The narrative is always that we are simply defending ourselves. Right. And I think the reason the UK is saying there was no warning shot fired is because if Russia does fire upon this Royal Naval vessel, they can say it was without warning. That's why I genuinely believe that, according to this BBC journalist, he heard shots fired. Doesn't know where they were off range, but it seems like there may have actually been warning shots, and the next move will be to bomb these vessels. Here's the game of chicken. Will the Royal Navy say, try me, and send these ships back into Crimean waters? Or will the UK say, Russia means business and we are backing down? There's something else happening in the news that is freaking me out. You see, we can talk about war, and I think it's very important. But we're also now hearing from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, a general, well, that he's woke and that they're absolutely indoctrinating the U.S. military to be woke. This is a horrifying development. Our soldiers will be held back by strange racial theories that have nothing to do with international conflict. And in fact, it will weaken them, and it is driving people to quit the armed forces. I've met many of these people personally. One man recently told me that he was on track to have a pretty good career until he saw the expansion of wokeness and said, I'll have nothing to do with it, and he left. What's left? Well, I mean, take a look at the Proud Boys versus Antifa. We know how those fights go. Antifa, for sure, they're aggressive, but they're not typically those who would win. Is that who we want in our armed forces? And perhaps what we're seeing is a psychological component of the international conflict. China, of course, would love it if our military is woke. Putin recently gave compliments to Joe Biden about his focus and sharp wit. Yeah, Joe Biden, the guy who can barely talk straight. Meanwhile, we are here in the U.S. dealing with a massive internal conflict, which is probably why Russia feels so confident to threaten to bomb anyone who enters Crimean waters. Well, let's read this news and see what's happening. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com and become a member to get access to exclusive members-only segments from the Timcast IRL podcast. Yesterday, we had Michael Knowles on the show. You're going to want to watch that bonus segment at Timcast IRL. But when you become a member, you're not just getting access to the exclusive content. You're helping fund our new newsroom and the journalism that is being produced, as well as the expansion of content. We have a new paranormal and mysteries writers joining. We are hiring new journalists. That's what you are supporting when you become a member. But don't forget, the most important thing you can do, like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with your friends. I don't have the marketing budget of CNN, and more importantly, YouTube props up leftist propaganda and mainstream personalities with a establishment frame of a perspective. If you think what I'm saying is important, if you trust the work that I do and want to help support it, share this, because if everybody did, well, we'd get more viewers and ratings than CNN overnight. Let's read the news. First, from the Daily Mail, Russia threatens to bomb any warship that sails too close to Crimea after Moscow fired warning shots at British destroyer in Black Sea standoff. They say the deputy foreign minister, Sergei Ryabkov, said on Thursday that any invading warships could be attacked the next time they sail too close to Crimea. Moscow boasted that a Su-24 dropped 4 bombs in Britain's HMS Defender's path after it was ordered to change course after warning shots were fired from a patrol ship. But Britain said the destroyer stayed in international waters and no shots were fired, and the firing was from nearby Russian naval exercises. Why would Russia lie when they could just do it? I'm sorry, that's why I don't believe the UK. There is an international precedent. I would say that the UK would seek to be protected. Let me reframe. The UK can simply say, we were never warned if they get fired upon. But why would Russia actually fire shots, then say they were warning shots, but they weren't? If Russia wanted to claim warning shots were fired, they'd literally just do it, right? The UK, I don't think, has the credibility on this one. They say the ship was part of a convoy from NATO-backed Ukraine to fellow NATO ally Georgia, but its voyage took it past the disputed strategically important Crimea Peninsula that was invaded and seized by Moscow in 2014. The Royal Navy insists the Freedom of Navigation Patrol took it through international waters and that Russia is trying to illegally claim ocean beyond its 12-mile territorial waters. 2 Black Sea Fleet Coast Guard ships continue to shadow the destroyer from 100 yards away, while 20 military aircraft patrol the skies today. The British Type 45 destroyer has been on operations in the Black Sea alongside American Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, USS Laboon, and Dutch warship HN-LMS Evertsen. The standoff was the first time since the Cold War that Moscow acknowledged using live ammunition to deter a NATO warship, reflecting the growing risk of military incidents amid soaring tensions between Russia and the West. But it's not just Russia and the West. Russia knows that because of the pressure that China is getting from the United States, there's an opportunity for a tacit alliance. That if we challenge Russia, our forces will be spread too thin, and China could then move in on Taiwan. It is almost a Mexican standoff, but not quite. Russia and China aren't going to fight each other. As soon as the United States makes a move against either Russia or China, the other can move in. Now, in this instance, it's not so much about moving in. Russia has been building up forces along the eastern border of Ukraine, though I think they pulled that back a little bit, leading many people to fear that Russia would invade eastern Ukraine and take even more territory. For the time being, they already have Crimea, but they definitely want to defend it. Daily Mail says after the standoff, Sergei Ryabkov said on Thursday that in the future, Russia would fire on any intruding warships too close to the Crimean Peninsula because the security of our country comes first. Well, check out these photos. These are really amazing photos. They mean it. This is Russia's only warm water port. All of their other ports are very, very far north. In fact, Russia is north of North Korea. For a lot of people who don't know that, north of China. So this gives them access to the Black Sea, which through the Bosphorus, Turkey, Istanbul, gives them access to the Mediterranean and then out through these oceans. Without Crimea, they're in trouble. Back several years ago, when Ukraine was discussing joining NATO, and now they're saying, effectively it's aligned with NATO, Russia knew that if NATO gained influence in Ukraine, they would lose access to the Crimean port. So what happened? Well, all of a sudden there was this referendum and Crimea voted to become Russia. So here we go. Russia took it because they could not let it fall to the West. Now, back at the Daily Mail, they show many photos. Check out this one. Russia released footage filmed from one of its Su-24M attack jets, which showed HMS Defender sailing off Crimea, but not the moment it alleges shots were fired and 4 bombs were dropped. Issuing a stark warning, the Russian official said, "What can we do? We can appeal to common sense, demand respect for international law. If this does not help, we can bomb, not only in the direction, but also on target. if our colleagues do not understand. I warn everyone violating the state borders of the Russian Federation under the slogan of free navigation from such provocative steps, because the security of our country comes first. Backing up his comments, the Kremlin said Moscow would respond harshly to any similar actions in the future and warned against any further provocations. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov continued, if unacceptable provocative actions are repeated, if those actions go too far, no options to legitimately protect the borders of the Russian Federation could be excluded. Ryabkov also warned that balancing on the brink of confrontation would have very serious consequences for anyone who tried to plan or carry out such events, as he expressed outrage at the UK's behavior. The diplomat said, this is a very serious situation. We condemn the actions of the British side. The territorial integrity of the Russian Federation is inviolable. The inviolability of its borders is an absolute imperative, and we will protect all this through political, diplomatic, and when necessary, military methods. Even going so far as to say, if they have to, they will respond with nuclear weapons. Now, there's some very serious moral and ethical conundrums we face here with this conflict. Russia, did they have the right to seize Crimea? No. Ukraine is sovereign. They're not part of the Russian Federation. The Soviet Union no longer exists. But Russia was desperate. They knew that if they lost this warm water port, they were in very serious trouble. They need to use this port to bring in oil, for instance, to the Mediterranean. Without that access, they would be cut off in many ways. Certainly, there are other ports they have access to, but they're typically colder. There's also the Northwest Passage, which has been opening up in recent years. So Russia made their move. Now, it's fair to say, from the West's perspective, of course, it was an invasion. It was illegal. They claim the people of Crimea voted to join Russia. Yeah, right. Like anybody actually believes this. The issue is we're no longer in the era of kinetic warfare being the most effective warfare. Information warfare, economic warfare, for instance, can be much more powerful. So when the U.S. issues sanctions against Russia or Iran or any other country, that pressure could lead to kinetic warfare because of desperation. Russia, feeling the heat from the West and about to be boxed in, was forced to make a move. And they really were forced. Not that I'm saying the move was correct, but what should they do? Sit back and say, we will lose? Not a fan of the moves they're making, but they do not want to become subservient, so they took action. You wouldn't expect any less from anyone else, which means the UK and the US, Western allies, may very well say we will not accept that move by you, Russia, and we will continue to press upon Ukrainian territorial waters, Crimea, where Russia will then say you are violating our territory, and the next time a bomb does drop and does strike this ship, and then we get war. Newsweek reports, Russian general defends right to use nuclear weapons if existence of state is threatened. Isn't this a threat to the state? Access to the Black Sea? On Wednesday, General of the Army, Valery Gerasimov, Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces, raised concerns about the development of weapons blurring lines during the Moscow International Security Conference on Wednesday. He stressed the need for treaties to keep nuclear weapons in check and categorized Russia's nuclear arsenal as being purely defensive. While Russia's policy isn't to be aggressive with the use of nuclear weapons, TASS, the official Russian news agency, reported Gerasimov noted that the country reserves the right to deploy the measure as a response. That response could be prompted by another country's use of nuclear or other mass destruction weapons against Russia or its allies, or in case of aggression against Russia with conventional weapons that endanger the very existence of the state. Could it be that the UK having their HMS Defender go near Crimea could be a very, very serious threat? And Russia might seek to end the war before it begins by firing an ICBM or some kind of other nuclear missile? Perhaps. I don't want to pretend like it's likely. I don't want to be overly sensationalist. Though they're saying it, I really, really think they're going to refrain from using nuclear weapons. But you always got to be careful. You can't operate under this idea that it can't happen here, because it can. War has happened before. It could happen again and likely will. They say in June 2020, Putin endorsed Russia's nuclear deterrent policy, which allows him to use nuclear weapons in response to a strike with conventional weapons. Putin could also deploy nuclear weapons if Russia gets reliable information about the launch of missiles targeting its territory or allies, according to the AP. With relations between the U.S. and Russia at a post-Cold War low, Putin's signing of that document raised concerns about a potential conflict and supported Russia's consideration of America's stability to launch a military strike as a top threat. Gerasimov pointed to the development of nuclear weapons and the Allied bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki as a demonstration of the ability for a military confrontation to turn into a hot phase. Given the danger a nuclear war would pose to the world, Gerasimov said preventing the conflict is the primary goal of strategic stability between the U.S. and Russia. But let's think about a game of chicken. When two cars are speeding towards each other, of course, neither wants to get hit. But who blinks first? You see, Russia will end up saying something like, we have been trying to prevent a nuclear war, but you keep pressing on our borders, sending ships through our territory. You started this, not us. That's how it will play out. I'm not saying we will go to war, but I'm saying should war happen, of course, both sides will simply say we have a right and they're going to do it. And then war happens. And both sides are justified. Both sides produce propaganda. Both sides assert their moral right to do the things they're doing. And then eventually someone gets wiped out. And then history is written by the victors. Now, should we go to war? I think we in the United States have very serious things to worry about. From the Washington Post, top U.S. military leader, quote, I want to understand white rage. And I'm white. Interesting. They report Army General Mark A. Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, admonished lawmakers over questions about critical race theory at a Wednesday hearing, saying it is important for leaders to be well-versed in many schools of thought. Quote, I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist, Milley told the House Armed Service Committee. So what is wrong with understanding the country which we are here to defend? Yes, you are free to read Mao and Marx and Lenin and anybody else, and it doesn't make you a communist. But when you start blaming white rage, when you start saying, so what, we should be teaching Marxist theory, sorry, I think you are a communist. They're going to say, Rep. Mike Waltz, a Republican from Florida, criticized reports the U.S. Military Academy at West Point teaches a course involving the theory, which broadly explores the idea that racism reaches beyond individual prejudice and affects minorities at the institutional level, particularly in criminal justice. That is a dramatic oversimplification of what critical race theory is, but I digress. They go on to say a guest lecture at the Academy included phrases such as white rage, Waltz claimed, and he pressed Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, the nation's first black Pentagon chief, to investigate further. Soon after, when the committee gave Milley a chance to expand, he launched into an impassioned defense of inquiry about U.S. society and its racial dynamics. He emphasized that the U.S. Military Academy is a university. Quote, I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, Milley said. Let me just point out, white rage is not a thing. It is one of these ideological buzzwords with little meaning that is used for political purposes. Now, certainly there are white people. Certainly people of all races can be racist. Certainly white nationalism is a very, very bad thing. But none of those things are motivators for what happened on January 6th. They say Milley said, focused on learning more about the mostly white, mostly male mob that stormed the Capitol on January 6th. The race of the individuals had nothing to do with January 6th. And you see, this is the point. They're trying to make it seem like the people on January 6th were white supremacists. The chairman of the Proud Boys is not a white man. They still try and claim he's a white supremacist, which makes literally no sense. Now they argue, Joy Reid argued to Chris Rufo at MSNBC, that whiteness emerged after colonization because Europeans viewed Native Americans as lesser. And the easiest distinction they could make was that, well, they all appeared white, as it were. And thus, all of a sudden, certain European nations were deemed better than others or something to that effect. These are the arguments they use to justify why it is that a black man could be a white supremacist. They call it political whiteness. It's absurd. It is illogical. It's self-contradictory. To hear the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff say this is scary. What's going to happen? We're going to go to war with China, and he's going to say, well, you know, we have been colonizers, so maybe we shouldn't retaliate. Well, we would go and defend Taiwan, but, you know, the Taiwanese and the Chinese, they're all ethnically similar, and therefore the white man shouldn't colonize Taiwan. Is that the idea? Should we leave South Korea because it's viewed as colonization? I assure you this, my family is eternally grateful to the United States for what they did for South Korea. And my family, you know, my grandfather, who made a Korean woman, fought in World War II. I'm sure they were very, very happy the United States came in and helped them. And so much so that my grandmother married an American guy. Should we leave and pull our troops out of South Korea? It's an interesting question. I'm not a big fan of intervention. As of right now, I'm also not one to just be like, of all places, South Korea, we should abandon. Now, we can talk about Afghanistan, and there's a bunch of nuance in these stories, but maybe there's a good reason to get our troops out of many of these places. The point is, if conflict does erupt, is there some kind of white rage that Mark Milley will be expressing that will prevent him from defending this country? I think the answer is yes, 100%. I think they will be blinded by this ideology and hate themselves to a degree that they won't do what needs to be done. We don't want war. We don't want nuclear bombs flying. But I don't want our country taken over, and I don't want to die. I don't think this country could be taken over because of the guns, but we don't want to see, it could be through economics and through influence, and that may be the case. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying in a ground invasion. Will we come to the point where Taiwan falls because we lack the political willpower to defend them? Maybe. It's hard to know what to do. And there's staunch anti-interventionists who say, so what? None of our business. But the last thing you want is a global superpower that is Chinese authoritarianism, Chinese communist authoritarianism. Here's another, it goes on. What is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that, Milley asked. I want to find that out. You see how they're framing it? The framing he has is that it was simply white people, it was white rage, and they hate America. When in fact, most of those people identify as patriots. Like Joe Biden recently said, quoting Thomas Jefferson's Blood of Patriots, Tree of Liberty statement, he said, you would need F-15s and nuclear weapons to go up against us, which sounds a lot like a threat. You mean to tell me that people who follow the quotes of Thomas Jefferson, who are challenging the government because they do not feel it represents them, will need nuclear weapons to go up against you? It's not the first time Joe Biden has said something like this, effectively saying he would nuke people. What are you going to do with a nuclear weapon? You're going to blow up a city? That's ridiculous. So let's talk about this insane cult. They say, only one elective course at the academy, Politics of Race, Gender, and Sexuality, includes critical race theory in its syllabus. Lieutenant General Darrell A. Williams, the university superintendent, said in a letter provided to Waltz, about 23 cadets take it a year, mostly by cadets majoring in political science, Williams said. This is the lie. What they're teaching is the application of critical race theory. And more importantly, they're applying critical race theory to every single subject matter. So what you get is, well, we had that viral photo of that one, I think it was a West Point cadet, showing, took his hat off and inside said, communism will win. You think he was wrong? This guy who's in these academies saying this, yeah, they're infiltrating. They will infiltrate, they will destroy, and they will rebuild. And it's happening to our police departments. So while we are greatly concerned about this external conflict with Russia or China, internally we are being eroded and destroyed. Milley said he was offended that critics, among them GOP lawmakers and right-wing commentators like Tucker Carlson, have accused the military of being woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there. Republicans for months have raked military and Pentagon leaders over policy and personnel changes, such as relaxing hair restrictions for women and reversing bans on open transgender service, as distractions fueled by a liberal agenda. Rep. Matt Gaetz had questioned the curriculum at the academy, later prompting the comments by Milley. After the hearing, Gaetz took a swipe at Milley on Twitter. With generals like this, it's no wonder we fought considerably more wars than we've won. I think he's correct. I think Matt Gaetz is correct about Mark Milley. The military is accused of being woke and weak. And Mark Milley comes out and capitulates to something he truly does not understand. Think about that for 2 seconds. Anybody who actually watches the news and the statements made by Joy Reid and other critical race theorists and then read what they write knows they're lying. For instance, Joy Reid said that critical race theory is not rooted in Marxist, tradition of Marxist philosophy. Quite literally is. And whose quote is that? Kimberly Crenshaw, one of the prominent critical race theorists and the individual who coined the term intersectionality, wrote that critical race theory was named to show people it was rooted in critical theory, which is rooted in Marxist philosophy. They lie. You need only read what they say to know they lie. This man has no idea what he's talking about. And what he just did, one of the most dangerous things at a time when Russia is threatening to bomb our allies, was he said, I am a moron who has no idea what any of this is, and I'm totally welcome to this subversive ideology which seeks to infiltrate, destroy, and then rebuild from the ashes. I have no problem with this seeping into our military at a time when we are facing very serious conflict. Putin knows it. Xi Jinping knows it. And here we are. This ideology is one of the main reasons we are seeing this. The New York Times, why police have been quitting in droves in the last year. Asheville, North Carolina has been the hardest hit by police departures in the wake of George Floyd protests. About a third of the force quit or retired. I mean, it's that simple. They're related. Cops are quitting. We're seeing more and more mainstreaming of the ACAB. All cops are bad. The B means something else, but you get the point. Internally, crime is skyrocketing. The economy is in shambles. This is the fault and the result of critical race theory ideology infecting our institutions. From our news media, to movies, to video games, to our police departments, to local politics. And with the fall of this stability, we will struggle to compete against our adversaries. I'm not so convinced there will be a kinetic war because there doesn't need to be. And I've long said this. And that means, violence. If you want to win a war, you simply manipulate the population through propaganda and information. If that doesn't work, then you put pressure through economics. And if that doesn't work, well, then things get hot. But the propaganda is working. It is so effective that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has gone woke. There's a saying, get woke, go broke. The last thing we need is the U.S. military getting woke and going broke. Of course, not broke in the literal sense, figurative, meaning they will become weakened, unable to defend us, and then things get bad. You can make arguments about the UK, maybe they should avoid Crimea. But there are military efforts and there are civilian efforts that take place in these in the Black Sea that Russia is at odds with. So what do we do? It's tough, isn't it? You could argue the anti-interventionist idea that we should not get involved in these wars no matter what. The United States is not Ukraine, nor are we Europe. We should mind our own business. There's challenges to that line of thinking. And I'm fairly anti-war. I say fairly because think of it this way. Russia takes Crimea. What's next? What if Russia then takes eastern Ukraine? Do we just keep sitting back, watching Russia and China seize more territory? China is violating certain treaties, and I think the Geneva Conventions, I could be wrong, building artificial islands, military bases, trying to seize the South China Sea and attacking civilians who are in that area of the ocean. Do we just sit back and say we will do nothing? Now, many people have said the United States is not the world police, and we shouldn't. But what if we do sit back and do nothing and allow China to just take whatever they want, and then Russia takes whatever they want? How long until Europe is Russia and all of Southeast Asia is just China? And then we are faced with a very serious conflict. Somebody recommended to me that I watch the episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine called In the Pale Moonlight. It is a fantastic episode. I know, pop culture reference, but it's an amazing bit of writing. We truly had some profound thinkers in the 90s with some of these series. In the show, if you're familiar with Star Trek, it's the Federation, and they're at war with something called the Dominion. Because the Klingons are allied with the Federation, they're dragged into the war as well. There's another empire called Romulans who refuse to enter the war because they have no qualm. They have a non-aggression pact. Eventually, though, they are tricked into fighting this war. But the general idea, and the reason I bring this up is it's an excellent bit of thinking by the writers. Now, I know, throw away all the sci-fi elements and all the fantasy elements if you're not a fan of this, but just think about what the idea behind this was. You have a potential conflict between three major powers. You've got Russia and China and the U.S. Well, whoever is whoever in this analogy, whatever. If we just sit back as China takes what they want from Southeast Asia or from Taiwan, eventually they will control everything and we'll be facing an even greater threat. Therein lies the big challenge. I don't believe in the idea of preemptive war, but we're not talking about preemptive strikes, right? We've seen that from the U.S. Bad idea. Bad. We shouldn't do it. Russia took Crimea. There's no preemptive about it. They literally took it. Should the U.S. just sit back and say, let them go to war with our allies and seize whatever land they want? If we do, how long until they control so much territory and they have so much production that they're a real threat to stopping us and we won't be able to do anything about it? Eventually, you let the problem grow so large and you'll be unable to do anything about it. That's the big challenge. Should the U.S. or the UK or anyone else free Crimea? I know people from Ukraine. I have friends from there. I've done some stories from there. I was there for quite a bit of time. I was there for like a month and a half or 2 months once. It was crazy. I was there for a long time. during the Euromaidan protests. It was the winter, I believe, of 2014. 2013 and then into 2014. These people tell me that they want Crimea back, that there are many people who lived in Crimea but would cross back and forth for work, and now they can't because of Russian occupation. Should we free them? If we do, Russia would certainly retaliate in desperation. This is the crisis of war, and it's why there's no easy answer. Some people just say, let them do whatever they want. Okay, imagine this scenario. Russia takes eastern Ukraine, takes Crimea. Their influence spreads. They seize more and more of Ukraine. Europe is unable to defend itself. More and more countries fall along the eastern border and forms a new pseudo-Soviet bloc. And then eventually they put pressure on us. They sanction us. They come to our borders. They go through South America. They go through Mexico. Then we're confronting a major threat that we can't stop. So I don't know what we do. I don't have all the answers. I can only tell you that the wokeness of the military freaks me out. Because if it does come to trading blows, our military is being gutted from its core by people like Mark Milley who are too stupid to realize what's happening around them. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.